Whenever we do need a calculator, I'll have Desmos on my computer to show, but you are allowed to use a calculator, so it's fine if you use. So here's the first problem. So if 1/2 x minus 1/6 x is equal to 1, we're looking for the value of x. Well, we see there's two values having x, but they have a different denominator. So the first thing we're going to do is just change everything to one single denominator. So that 1/2 x is going to be the same as 3x over 6. Then you subtract that from 1/6 x. That's all going to be equal to 1. So let's first combine these x's right here, which is going to give us 2x over 6, which is the same as 1/3 x. And we set that equal to 1. And from there, you're just going to multiply each side by 6 over 2 in order to isolate the x. And when you do that, you will see that this 6 over x cancel out. So you're left with only x. When you multiply the 1 by 6 over 2, you're going to see x is equal to 3. So this was a more straightforward problem on the easier difficulty. It's on the lowest difficulty, but your answer should be C. And a lot of y'all said that. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. So 66x equals 66x. How many solutions does this equation have? All right, so for this one, a lot of you already answered really fast. That's good. This one's again on the easier side of it. So how it's going to go is you have these two equations and you want to see how many answers they have. This is basically going to see is how many times they intersect. So right here we have 66x and 66x. So you can already see that these are going to be the same lines. And the same lines, they're going to be overlapping each other exactly. And which at every point on x, they're going to have the same value. So it's going to have infinitely many solutions. And you can see this where if you were to like graph it on an XY graph, you'd see where you have 66x and like this going through the origin. And you have another one directly on top of it going through, which is how it's going to have infinitely many solutions. Some people don't understand. So how it's going to work is when you're looking at this, you want to see how many solutions it has. And the solution is basically going to equal to how many times these two lines are going to intersect at. Because these, don't be thinking just like values. These are basically just equations for lines. This one's going to have 66x, which has a slope of 66, that x value. And this one's the same thing. And once you view these as the same line, they both don't have any y-intercepts, but they have the same slope. So if you are to graph it, like I did earlier, you would see that you'd have 166x like this, and it has no y-intercepts, so it intersects at the origin. And then another one we'll show in this red color is gonna have the same slope, same y-intercept 0. So when you graphed it, you're gonna get the same kind of graph where they're gonna be overlapping and there's gonna be infinitely many solutions. And this is for all x values. And this is why. All right. Does anyone have any other questions? No, let's move on. All right. Problem. So we have this equation, sorry. A parentheses 3 minus x minus b is equal to -1 minus 2x. And the equation above a and b are constants. If the equation has infinitely many solutions, what are the values of a and b? Equation where you see they have infinitely many solutions. And this is similar to what we saw in the other problem. This means for every value of x, these two lines, since these are both lines, must have the same equation and overlap. So what we're first going to do that is we're going to distribute everything. So, but the main thing we have to distribute is just a to 3 and to the negative x. So let's do that right now. You'll have 3a minus ax minus b. So this is one line after it's fully distributed, and that's going to be equal to -1 2x. So what we first must identify is which parts of the slopes and which parts of the y-intercept. This 2x right here, along with this minus or negative ax, are going to be our slopes. This is our mx, which leaves the negative 1 on this side and the 3a minus b on this side to be the y-intercepts, in which they all must be equal to each other because they're the same lines. So in order for the slopes to be equal, we need to see that negative ax must be equal to negative 2x. And from there, the x will just cancel out. Same with the negative signs. And you'll see that after everything cancels out, because they have x in common, they have a negative in common, you're going to see that a equals 2. So this is going to be our, in order to make our slopes correct. So now this checks out. This will check out if a is equal to 2. And now we want to look at our y-intercepts. The y-intercepts on each side, 3a minus b, and I write that right here, would have to be equal to negative 1. And if we know that 3a, if we know a is equal to 2, then from what we can do there is that we can plug in this a and you'll get, so this is a negative 1 right here. You'll see that 6 minus b then equals 1. You move the 6 to the other side by subtracting each side by 6. And then from that, the negatives on the negative b and negative 7 are going to cancel out. And you're going to just b equals 7. This one is, again, a little bit more challenging, but just distributing the a to everything and getting the slopes equal to each other along with the y-intercepts equal to each other, which our answer is going to be B. Do any of y'all have any questions on how we tackle this problem? This was on the hardest difficulty, so at least with this section.
Yo, this dude talked about this problem for like 10 minutes. I did it in 2.
All right, let's move to the next one.
Does this cover all grades like 8th, 9th, and 10th?
All right. So here's the next problem. Oxygen gas is placed inside a tank with a constant volume. The graph shows the estimated temperature Y in kelvins of the oxygen gas when pressure is X in atmospheres. What is the estimated temperature in kelvins of the oxygen gas when the pressure is 6 atmospheres? All right. A lot of y'all have already answered. Maybe wait for one more person. All right. So this one's pretty straightforward. It's basically just reading the graph. So if we know pressures on the X, temperatures on the Y, they're asking what the temperature is going to be when pressure is 6. So if we look at the X-axis, 6 is going to be right here. And all we have to do then is move up to the slope and see that right here, this pressure of 6 atmospheres is going to correspond to the temperature of 700 kelvins, meaning our answer would be C. Is there any questions on that? So now we're on to this one. The graph represents the total charge in dollars by an electrician for X hours of work. The electrician's charges a one-time fee plus an hourly rate. What is the best interpretation of the slope of the graph? And the level on the previous one was the easiest one. So let's look at this problem. So let's get this. We don't know the Y isn't labeled here, but it tells us in the question. Okay, so the graph represents total charge in dollars by an electrician for X hours of work, meaning the X is going to be our hours. And what this is telling us is it represents total charge per hour, meaning the Y is going to be our total charge, which is going to be dollars. Let's just write that up here. So now we have the X and the Y and X axis labeled. We can figure out the slope, and slope is just changing Y, we're changing X. So if it's going to be the amount of dollars, the rate we're paying per hour, we can just see that this is just our hourly rate, meaning our answer is going to be A. And this is just found by figuring out the y-axis means, the x-axis means, and relating that to the slope equation, which is y over x. All right. Do any of y'all have any questions? And this was on the second difficulty. I was wondering. All right. So this next one, we're given a chart with population of Greenleaf, Idaho. The table shows the population of Greenleaf, Idaho for the year 2000 and 2010. If the relationship between population and year is linear, which of the following functions P models the population of Greenleaf T years after 2000? All right. So let's go over this. So what we need to know from this problem is it tells us that there's a linear relationship, meaning to find the equation or the model that'll show this function, which is going to follow y equals mx plus b. So what we can figure out from this chart is our slope, or m, and slope is change in y over change in x. And so meaning we need to identify our y and our x. So x is usually modeled as time, which we have our years right here. So we'll call our years as x. And our population is going to be our y. So now what we have, since we have two values, we can figure out the change in y over change in x. Let's write that up here over the change in x. The change in y is going to go from 862 to 846. So it's just going to be this. Or sorry. It's going to go 842 minus, or 86. Yeah, sorry. That's going to go as 846 minus 846 or 862. Sorry. Like this, that's a change in y. Our change in x is going to go from the year 2000 to 2010. And that's just a 10-year difference. So we can just write 10 here. Now, if you don't want to do the 846 minus 862 yourself, you are allowed to use a graphing calculator. So I'm going to do that really quick and divide or do all the math really quick, which you're allowed to do, and it makes it much simpler. So when you do the math on this, you're going to see that our slope is negative 1.6. So our slope is negative 1.6, and we're modeling our x value as years t. So we can say our slope is 1.6 t. And that's going to be equal to p of t, but we don't know our, we don't really know our y-intercept, but this is going to be really simple. And what we're going to do here is you're just going to plug in values from the chart. So at the year 2000, you're not plugging 2000 to t because this is t years after 2000, meaning 2000 is our initial value. So it's just going to be a time of 0. So when you do that, you're going to just see this is going to be 0 plus b, which is our y-intercept. Yes, the whole math section is without with a calculator. You're able to use it the whole time. And going by this graph at the year 2000, you're able, you see the population is 862, meaning that our y-intercept is going to be 862, and we can just plug that in into this b value, and your C P of t is then 862 minus 1.6 t. I mean, our answer should be A. Now, a lot of y'all did choose D, and the reason it isn't D, you're not subtracting 2000 years because it's t years after 2000. The difficulty level on this one was the hardest difficulty, so it was a bit more challenging. What you have to do here is just use the graph to figure out your change in y over change in x, and then plug in values from it to figure out your y-intercept, and that's how you're going to get this equation. Do any of you all have any questions?
Uh, I didn't understand how do you solve it. Can you please reteach it?
Yeah. Okay. So we're given a chart here, and you see it's a linear. It's going to have a linear relationship, meaning when we create an equation for it or a model for it, it's going to follow y equals mx plus b. M is going to be our slope, which is the same as change in y over change in x. So what we need to use is using this graph, we need to figure out what our X and Y values are. It's changing with respect to T or X. So our years is going to be our X values, and then our population is going to be our Y values. So I need to do change in Y. It's going to be our change in Y is Y final minus Y initial. Our Y final is going to be this 846, and this Y initial is going to be our 862. So you subtract 846 by 862. That's our change in Y. And then our change in X, or I guess change in T, is going to be from 2000 to 2010. And that's just going to be a difference of 10 years. So when you do the math on this, and you're allowed to use a graphing calculator throughout the whole test, and you're going to have Desmos built into it. So when you do this math, you're going to get the slope as negative 1.6t. And then we rewrote it, the equation right here. But this b value is our y-intercept that we don't know of. And how you're going to figure out is using this chart, you're going to plug in values again. For our t values, we're going to plug in our year 2000, which is at t equals 0 since it's years after. So that means that's going to be equal to 0. And our p of t at 2000 is 862. And that's going to be equal to our b. So then you plug in 862 back into this b value right here. And you'll see P of t is then 862 minus 1.6t. Does that make more sense?
Yes, that does.
All right. And let me know if you have questions, you can just let me know in chat. Any way it works. All right. So let's move on to this next problem. All right. An employee at a restaurant prepares sandwiches and salads. It takes the employee 1.5 minutes, to prepare a sandwich and 1.9 minutes to prepare a salad. The employee spends a total of 46.1 minutes preparing X sandwiches and Y salads. Which equation represents the situation? Just relating values. So we see, or relating time values. So we need to identify from the equation or the question, you have 1.5 minutes to prepare sandwiches, 1.9 minutes to prepare salads, and then it's a total of 46.1. And what it tells us right here at the end is that X is going to correlate to minutes per sandwiches, or it's going to correlate to sandwiches, and Y is going to correlate to salads. So now we can figure out an equation for this. So our total is going to be 46.1 because that's the total amount of time we take between making sandwiches and between making salads. So 46.1 is then going to be equal to the amount of time we make sandwiches and salads. So you're going to see that Y is going to be equal to the number of salads. And if we look at the question, it says 1.9 minutes is used. So it should be Y times 1.9. And then you're going to add to this the amount of time it takes to make sandwiches, which is going to be 1.5 minutes for each sandwich X. That's going to be 1.5 times X, which our answer, like a lot of y'all did say, is maybe. This is on the easier difficulty, but it's just relating different values. Is anyone confused or have any questions? All right. So I think for some of you, you're having trouble understanding what this problem's asking. We're just creating an equation to relate the time values for sandwiches. Oh, what's the difference between A and B? Okay. The difference between A and B is these values. You see 1.9x is here instead of 1.5, and 1.5y is here instead of 1.9y. And the reason why B is correct is because X relates to sandwiches, meaning you're going to use 1.5 minutes to make each sandwich, which is the same as 1.5x. So you're relating the proper like symbol for sandwich and salad to the proper time. So the 1.5 minutes per sandwich is going to relate to 1.5x. The order does matter because you're spending a certain amount of time for X sandwiches and you're spending a certain amount of time for Y salads. which is why it needs to be related in this way. And there are 3 difficulties, by the way. All right. So here's our next question. We have a chart for characteristics of rock types. A city is planning to build a rock retaining wall, a monument, and a garden in a park. The table above shows 4 rock types that will be considered for use in the project. Also shown for each rock type is the weight per volume in pounds per cubic foot and the cost per pound in dollars. The equation 0.03 times 120 W plus 0.18 times 180 Z plus 3,385.8 is equal to 6,576.2 gives a total cost in dollars of the rocks used in the project in terms of number of feet squared of limestone W and the number of feet cubed, of basalt Z, and all 4 rock types are used in the project. Which of the following is the best interpretation of the 3,385.8 in this context? All right, I'm gonna wait for 1 or 2 more people to answer. All right, so from this question, we're given this equation, and the main thing we're focusing on is this 3,000 value right here. What we need to know from the question is it says that all 4 rock types are used, meaning basalt, granite, limestone, and sandstone are all used. And what it tells us is that Z is going to represent the basalt. So that's going to be Z. And then it tells us that W is going to be the limestone. From this, we know that 2 types of rocks are used. We know the basalt are used and the limestone is used, but there's no value to correlate, or there's no like variable to correlate granite and sandstone, meaning it's gonna be both the granite value and the sandstone value, like the amount of dollars is gonna be in this 3,000 value right here because there's no individual variable that relates them, meaning it's gonna be A. And this is just by analyzing the question, seeing that there's 4 rock types, all of them are used, but the only ones with variables in the equation are going to be our granite, are going to be our basalt and our limestone, meaning that this value right here must be the culmination of granite and sandstone. Is that a little bit confusing? It's okay if it is. I think most of these questions have been sent out to y'all. I don't exactly know. All right, they'll be sent out later. What level is the question? This question had a level of 2. It's probably because with a lot of the SATs, it's a lot of reading, and this is one of those questions where you have to read everything to understand it, which gives it a higher difficulty because you need to comprehend everything it's saying. But it's a level 2 difficulty, which is around medium. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next question right here. All right. So we're given this chart with X and Y values. For line H, the table shows 3 values of X and their corresponding values of Y. Line K is a result of translating line H down 5 units in the XY plane. What is the x-intercept of K? All right, seems like some of y'all are having trouble with problems, so we'll go over it in a sec. All right, I'm gonna go over it since it seems to be a little bit more challenging. So what we first need to do is we're given this table, and it's similar to that other one we saw when we're first gonna do the slope, which is change in Y over change in X, and we're given our Y values, we're given our X values. So we're going to use these 18 X values and 23 X values, and we're going to do change in Y over change in X, which is going to be 160 minus 130 And then our change in x is just 23 minus 18, which is going to be 5. And when you do the math here, you will get a slope of 6. So now we have our slope here. We can set up our equation where you're going to have y equals 6x, but we don't know our y-intercept, which is going to be b. And so we're going to do that same thing we did last time, where you're going to plug in any value from this table. Let's use the 18 and 30 value. So y is going to be 130. X, we're going to plug in as our x value. We're going to plug in 18. So 6 times 18 and then plus b. And then we're just going to move this 6 times 18 to the other side and subtract it from 130, which we can do using a calculator. So it's going to be 130 minus that 6 times 18. And from this, you're going to get your y-intercept as 22. So b is going to equal 22. So we can then do from here is you'll get 22. And we now are going to translate it down, but really quick, someone asked a question. 6x, oh, the reason I added this x is just because the slope is y equals mx plus b. So our real slope is 6, but it's multiplied by that some value of x. And that's just me trying to go faster than show. Okay. So we're going to do this equation. We're translating it down a few units. So let's just do this on Desmos to show you how Desmos works and how to make it easier. So you're going to have is y equals 6x. What was it? Sorry. Hold up. Let me move. I don't know if I can move the screen share here. All right. So we're going to have is our Desmos right here. And our equation we created was 6x plus 22. So let's do that right here. So here's our line right here. And what we're doing is it told us to translate it down 5 units. So if we translate it down, we can't really change the slope. The slope is still going to be 6. But when you translate it down, that y-intercept value is now changing and we're subtracting 5 from it. So it's just going to be 22 minus 5, which is going to be that 17. And from here, using Desmos, it's going to tell us our x-intercept is going to be at negative 2.833. So now let's go back to our problem right here. That's the way to use Desmos, which is I find easier. But you're going to see that our new x-intercept is going to be at negative 2.833. And what you're going to do here is then just figure out, you can figure out this out from here is just divide each value by divide each value and figure out which one gives you negative 2.833. So it's not going to be b. When you divide negative 9 by 2, that's going to be a value great. That's like negative 4 point something. So that's not going to be it. 6 divided by, or 17 divided by 6, though, is going to give us our answer, where our answer is going to be D. C is going to give us an answer that's greater than 3. You could, yes, you could just, so could you just make y equals 0 and get a fraction? You can just do that. I was just showing you a way to use it, Desmos, which is easier. But the other way you can do this is by, when you have this one, subtract the 5 from here, get the new equation, which is y equals 6x plus 17. And then you can plug in y equals 0 and then do it that way. Do we get a calculator to convert the decimals? Yes. You're able to have a calculator throughout the whole test, which is why you're able to use Desmos and why you're able to bring your own. Are you able to bring your own calculator to the PSAT? You are. There are certain approved ones, but like the TI 84 plus is allowed and most graphing calculators are allowed. Yeah, you can do linear regression. How do you get negative 2.833? So when we graphed on Desmos, it tells you where the y-intercept and x-intercept are. And from there, you can just figure it out. It'll tell you that the x-intercept is now after you translate it down. Did we get 22? Okay, so 22 we got from figuring out the y-intercept. What we did here is you got our equation before translating down as 6 equals, or y equals 6x plus b. B is our y-intercept. So you're going to take the value 18x and 130x, and you're plugging that in to figure out the b value. So this means 6 times that 18, which is equal to 130. And then by doing the math from here, you're going to see that b is then equal to 22. That makes sense? All right. If any of you have more questions, then I'll go over this problem again. All right. This was the hardest difficulty, by the way, so it was harder to do. All right, so here's the next problem. All right. Connor has C dollars and Maria has M dollars. Connor has 4 times as many dollars as Maria, and together they have a total of $25. Which system of equation represents the situation? So let's go over this. So Connor has C dollars for representing the amount of money. He has a C. Maria has M, and together they have a total of 25. So when we do the equation, everything then is going to have to equal 25 because that's the total. So let's set our total amount is 25, and that's going to equal the combined amount of money between Connor and Maria. Maria is going to have M dollars, and Connor would usually show us has C, and it's C dollars, but his amount of money is he has 4 times as much as Maria. So it's going to be 4. You're going to have to add 4M because you're multiplying the amount of money he has is 4 times Maria's. So when you plug it in, then you're going to get this equation. This one was on the easier difficulty, and it's again similar to that like sandwich and salad one where you're just relating different values. Does anyone have any questions? Could you say that again? Okay. So this is similar to that salad. I can give more time to work out the problems. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna say this again. Our total amount is $25, and that must equal to the combined amount of money that Connor and Maria have. Maria's amount of money is just M, which is shown right here. Yeah, wouldn't it just be 4M plus M equals 25? I think this is just more a mistake on how they printed this because, yeah, I agree. It should be 4M plus M equals 25. But I think what it's just saying in this right here is that the C is going to correspond to this 4M. I think that's what they want you to do. It is written weird. Yeah. All right. Does anyone have any questions? What does the C mean? The C is, it tells us C is the amount of money that Connor has. All right. If any of you, if you have questions, let me know now, but if you don't, I'll move on. Why is there C equals? What do you mean? All we're saying is that C, Connor has 4 times as money as Maria, so it's 4M. And then as we're saying that this C is equal to 4M. All right. Here's our next problem. So y equals 2x plus 10y, which equals 2x minus x. At how many points do the graphs of the given equation intersect in the xy plane? All right. So let's go over this. So we have 2 lines. We have y equals 2x plus 10 and y equals 2x minus 1. What this means is they do have the same slopes. So if we were to just do, we're not going to actually graph them, but if we were to just graph these normally, you're going to see that one has an intercept of 10 up here, but one's going to have another one is going to have an intercept of -1. So when you graph these, they have the same exact slope, meaning they're parallel to each other, and which they'll never touch each other. Even though they have the same slope, they have different y-intercepts, meaning they're never going to touch each other. And our answer is going to be A, which is 0. Is anyone confused on that? No, let's move on. Say it again. Okay. So we're given two equations, y equals 2x plus 10, and then another one, which is y equals 2x minus 1. And what this means is that they have the same slope of 2x, but because they have different y-intercepts, this isn't the same line. So when we graph it like we did right here, one's have an intercept up here at 10, the other's gonna have an intercept right here, right here. And because they have the same slope, they're parallel to each other and they'll never touch, meaning as no solutions, or I mean they never touch each other. So there's no points that they'll touch. All right. Let's move on to this next one. Okay. So you have two equations, yx minus 5y equals 4 and 4x minus 8y equals 9. If xy is a solution to the system of equations above, what is the value of 3x plus y? Problem. All right, so this problem, these are two lines, two linear equations. We have one right here and one right here. So instead of doing the algebra where you can't do the whole algebra, we would make one of these x values equal to the other and cancel out and figure out the y and x values. But the best way you can do it is by graphing these on Desmos. I'm sorry, Desmos on book. I think Desmos is probably more restricted on it to like graphing and just figuring out and multiplying things and adding it. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is these are two lines, and instead of doing the whole algebra to figure out, this is a much faster way to get the answer. That's gonna save you a lot of time. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna go on Desmos and we're gonna graph each of these lines. So you're gonna have 7x minus 5y is equal to 4, and 4x minus 8y is equal to 9. So just to check the equation, make sure. Yeah, it's all correct. Now, what it tells us here is that xy is a solution. And when they say something's a solution between two lines, that's basically where they're going to intersect. So we see that if we zoom in, they intersect at this point right here. So these are x and y values, which are what's it called? Which are decimals. So our x value then is going to be negative 0.36, and our y value is going to be negative 1.3. So let's just note that down really quick. If you have a scratchy paper, I'll write it right here. So our x value is an equal negative 0.36, and our y value is going to equal negative 1.3. And now that we have our x and y values, sorry, it's written poorly. What we're gonna do here now is we have our x and y. What it asks us to do is multiply both of these by 3. So if you multiply negative 3.6 by 3, let's do that on our calculator. You'll see it's around 1.08, which is closer to 1. And if we have to round it, I think that's okay. So it's going to be negative this. And then our y value, when you'll multiply negative 1.3 times 3, you get 3.9, negative 3.9, which is closer to 4. So let's just round these off since there's no decimals in these answer, which is just going to be negative 1 minus 4. And our answer is going to get, we're going to get negative 5. And which our answer is going to be B. This is the fastest way I'd say you can get it instead of doing all the algebra. It's just you have Desmos, use it to your advantage. If you're able to graph two lines and find where they intersect, instead of doing algebra, I do that instead and then do what the problem's asking you to do. Is anyone confused? How do you do it using algebra? I don't want to go through the whole math because it's gonna take a lot of time and be pretty messy. But what you do is since you have these two lines, you're gonna want to find a way to multiply like this equation by a certain amount. So you multiply it by like let's say -7/4. This whole equation by -7/4. And when you do that, you'd allow for these x values to cancel out up here, and then you add the like terms this way, and it's just gonna be an annoying problem to do. It's not gonna be pretty doing all the math, which is why she says most.
So in SAT, do you recommend just using Desmos for these kind of problems right away, or even if they may seem easy?
Okay, so if they're quick, easy ones like those ones where it's 2x minus y equals 2x minus 10, and then like y equals 2x minus 1. If they're pretty forward ones, you won't have to use Desmos. But if it's one like these, it's going to be easier to use Desmos, and you're going to save yourself a lot of time on the SAT. And so it's just personal preference, but I prefer using Desmos.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go over the next problem here. And that was the hardest difficulty, so it's okay if it challenged you more. It's good. All right. So Tom scored 85, 78, and 98 on his first three exams in history class. Solving which equality gives the score G on Tom's four exams that will result in a mean score on all four exams of at least 90. All right. So let's go over this one. So actually, I need a little bit more time because some people want more time. All right. This one's again setting up those inequalities. And what we're looking for is mean between four scores. So our four scores are going to be 85, 78, 98, and then our fourth score it says is G. So when you add all of these up, it's 85 plus 78 plus 98, and then plus our G score right here. So these are all our test scores. And how you find the mean is you're gonna have all your values and then divide it by the number of those values. And here there's four exams. So you're dividing this whole thing by four. And you want your score to be at least 90. So it's gonna be, 90 right here. And it's gonna have to be written like this because this is gonna be our score right here. And it must be either equal to this at 90 or it must be less 90. That's how you're going to set the equation. Our answer will be C. You don't even need a, or you, but this is going to be our score. You don't really, once you get to this point right here, you can already do process of elimination and figure out which answer is which. But our answer will be C. Does anyone have any questions? Let's move on. What level is this? Check for you. The level this one was on, it was the easiest level. Because this one's just setting up an inequality and just knowing how mean works. All right. Let's do one more of these questions and maybe I'll skip ahead to maybe more trig or something. All right, well, here's the problem. Valentina bought 2 containers of beads. In the first container, 30% of the beads are red, and in the second container, 70% of the beads are red. Together, the containers have at least 400 red beads, which inequality shows this relationship where X is the total number of beads in the first container and Y is the total number of beads in the second container. I'm gonna go over this one. This is similar to the previous one we did. We're just setting up a relationship. So we have 2 containers. The first one they say is X, and the second one they say is Y. And they say is 30% of beads are red in the first container. Let's keep this in mind. And the 70% of beads are red in the second container. So what we can do with this is just know when you write percentages, this 30% is going to be written as 0.3 and 70% is written as 0.7. So 30% in the first container is going to be 0.3 times X because we're calling X, we're saying that X is a total number of beads in container 1. And then you're adding that to plus 0.7 times Y because it's 70% of the second container. And just from getting this relationship, you can already figure out that your answer is going to be A. It can't be C because that's just written incorrectly, neither D. And the reason B is going to be wrong is just you're relating the percentages wrong. The 70% is not going to correspond to X, it's going to correspond to the Y. But our answer is going to be A here. And then you're going to have this inequality sign saying that's greater than or equal to 400. Does anyone have any questions? Is the PSAT online and are we allowed to have scratch paper? It is online, but you are allowed to have scratch paper by you. Like I have some right next to me right here. And you'll be able to have your own handheld calculator and you're gonna have Desmos. And obviously a pen, eraser, whatever writing utensil you want. But it is gonna be online. You're gonna be answering the questions online. All right. How do you guys feel about skipping maybe to different kind of problems? Because they're all kind of related to the algebra portion. All right. So let's start backwards. All right. So now the last section on the SAT is going to be more the one relating to trig. So, which I think a lot of y'all want. So we're going to have triangle ABC shown above is a right triangle and sine of B is equal to 15 or is equal to 5 over 13. What is the length of side BC? Okay. Sine, okay. Sine of B. Sine of B is basically we're calling B an angle right here. So you're sine of this angle. I'll explain how it all works. I think some people might not know how trigonometry completely works. It's fine. Wait for a few more people to answer. This is a free response question. When do basis kids learn trig? They usually learn it in around 8th grade, I'd say. It's 7th or 8th. It's one of the two. From what I remember.
Uh, I don't know how to solve this problem. Can you mind helping me?
Yeah, I'll go over it now. So how it's gonna work is I'm gonna go over just a quick overview of trig, just really briefly. You have a triangle right here. This is what we're gonna call our hypotenuse. And these kind of ones you can call it can change. But let's say we're measuring from this angle right here. Let's call it some angle theta. When you're measuring from this angle, the one right here is going to be called our opposite. The one right here is going to be called our adjacent. But let's say we measure from this angle right here, then this is going to be our opposite. This is going to be our adjacent. So once you get how these sides work, you have an acronym called SOHCAHTOA, but it's basically saying that sine equals our, sorry, that was poorly written. You're going to basically see that sine is equal to our opposite over our hypotenuse, depending on which angle you're measuring it from. Our cosine is going to be adjacent over a hypotenuse. And then our tangent, which we're going to abbreviate as tan too. We abbreviate tangent as tan. It's going to be our opposite or adjacent. So it may be confusing at first if this is the first time we're saying it, but that's perfectly fine. All right. But these are our basic equations. So when we look at this problem, I'm going to use red right here. We're saying sine of B is 5/13. And so angle B is this one I circled right here. And if you kind of like had to turn your screen away, but if you correlate the opposite, the hypotenuse and adjacent, you're going to see that this 26 is our hypotenuse measured from this angle B. This is going to be our opposite, and this is going to be our adjacent. And then using our equations, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So sine of B is then 5/13, meaning that this AC length is going to actually, it's hard to explain, but this is simplified because we know our hypotenuse is 26, meaning that everything was halved, meaning this is going to have to be 10. So AC is 10. This is just realizing that the question was simplified because this is basically be opposite of hypotenuse, which is going to be it's going to be AC over 26. And this is going to be equal to 5/13. And then if you can do the cross multiplying, but you're just going to see that they just factored out a 2 on the 5/13, which our AC is then 10. And then from here, it's just Pythagorean's theorem. You can do it, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Our c squared is going to be that 26 squared. Let's just call our a squared is 10, so just 10 squared. And then we're gonna have our b squared, which we don't know. And we're gonna say this b squared is just this length we're looking for, which is BC. And then you can just do this with your calculator. So it's gonna be just 26 squared minus 10 squared. And then you can just do the square root of that. And you'll get your answer is 24. This shouldn't be, if you know how trig works, this is just shouldn't be too complicated. It's just correlating each side. But if you don't know trig, it's gonna be a little bit more confusing. For free response, if the question doesn't give you units, it doesn't let you type in words on the free response. You're just gonna put the value. That's how it's gonna work. You just need to put what the value is. So instead of putting 24 units, you just put 24. If it asks for 24 meters, just put 24, and they'll just know it's in meters. Can I repeat it one more time? Yes. Just give me a second to answer these other questions. Do you have to know cosecant, secant, or cotangent? Not for this. That's to College Board, that's too complicated, and you won't need to know that. How many free response questions are there? If I remember correctly, it's around out of the 27 questions, or out of the 22 questions per module on the math, there's around maybe 3 to 5 free response questions, is what I'd say. Okay, can I repeat it one more time? If you know how trig works, just you don't have to look at this stuff is just explaining trig. But measuring from B, you're going to see our sine is this opposite value over our hypotenuse. And we wrote that right here as AC over 26 because our opposite is AC. And this is equal to 5 over 13. And we got that from the question. So then you really AC over 26 equals 5 over 13. You can do the whole cross multiplication to figure out what AC is. But you can see that these 13 is just twice, or 26 is just half, or is 2 times 13. So you see they factored out a 13 to get to this 5, or they factored out a 2 to get to this 5 over 13. So just AC is then going to be that 2 times 5. And once you find AC as 10, you just need to do Pythagoras theorem. And it's going to be a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Our c squared is 26 squared. Our a squared is 10 squared. And then we have plus b squared written right here. And then from there, you just have to do the math, which it'd be easier to do using a calculator. And this 24 is equal to our b, which is also bc. Does anyone have any questions? Not, I'm gonna go to the next one. Okay. I think trigonometry is something we should focus on. All right. For the triangle shown, which expression represents A? All right. This isn't directly involving trig, but it's involving triangles. So let's go over this problem. We're trying to figure out what A is. And this is similar to what we did on the last problem. You're just going to use Pythagoras theorem since it's a right triangle. And so let's just write down the equation for Pythagoras theorem. It's going to be c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. C squared is going to be related to our hypotenuse. So we're looking for A. So I'll just call this one our A. When I rearrange the equation, you're just going to see a squared equals c squared minus our b squared. And then to figure out what A is, you just square root everything. Meaning that our A value is then equal to c squared minus b squared. From here, we just need to plug in what c and our b values are. And that's going to be, our c is our hypotenuse. So it's 21 squared. Minus b squared. And our b is going to be the 6. So it's just 6 squared. This is just rearranging Pythagoras theorem to figure out the answer. Which our answer is going to be A. Do any of y'all have any questions? Not, let's move on. What was the difficulty? Let me get that for you right now. This difficulty was on 2, probably because it just involves knowing how Pythagoras theorem works and how to rearrange it. Okay, let's move to this one. This one again seems to be similar to the other one. Which equation shows a relationship between the side lengths of the triangle? Yeah, a lot of y'all are getting this one pretty fast, which is good. All right. Let's go over this one really quick. This one is very, very similar to our last problem where it's just going to be Pythagoras theorem. So let's do this. 19 is going to be our C, so it should be 19 squared is going to be equal to a squared plus b squared. B we have right here. We don't really have a value, so we're just going to write b squared, which means our a squared or a value is then going to be this 4. So it's just going to be a b squared plus 4 squared. This one was super straightforward, just straight Pythagorean's theorem. And our answer is going to be C. This one was, I'm pretty sure, the easiest difficulty. Yeah. All right, so here's our thing. So we have two triangles. Sorry, it's hard to see the smaller ones. We have triangle ABC and DEF are shown above. Which of the following is equal to the ratio BC over AB? All right, so let's do this one. So we have two triangles, and when they say that they're related, like BC is related to AB and there's a ratio, what you can then do with this, or what we're saying is these two are related to each other and there's a ratio between them. But we're going to see that these are similar triangles, and how we're going to prove that is just figuring out the angles. This one right here has 32. This is a 90, meaning you can figure out this angle B, which is going to be 58. And again, by doing the same thing right here, you have 90 right here, 58 right here. Subtract it all from 180, and you see this one's 32. The reason for this is just triangles. The interior angles are all going to be equal to all the interior angles of a triangle are going to be equal to 180. So once you figure out what angle B is and angle E is, then you're going to be able to relate different things using the DEF triangle. So if BC relates to AB, then measuring from this angle B right here from the 58 angle, this BC is going to relate to this DF. And then the hypotenuse AB is just going to relate to DE. That's just, they're not the hypotenuse in common. And so now what we can do is we can write DF then is related to DE. And we're trying to get our answer as, pretty sure it's B. Does that make sense, guys? Or do you want me to re-explain it? All right, this one, for those all wondering, is on the harder difficulty because you have to figure out the angles of the triangle and then relate the proper proportions, which can be a little bit challenging. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next problem then. Okay, let me zoom into this one. What? Is this good for you all? I think it should be. All right, so we have this figure. In the figure above, lines, I think that's L and M are parallel. Y equals 20 and Z equals 60. Oh, what was the answer for the last problem? It was B. And what is the value of X? I'm gonna just zoom in on this really quick just to see it better. So we have two triangles, but we're focusing on this smaller one right here. So what we're doing is we need to figure out what X is. We know what Z is. It tells us in the equation or in the question that Z is 60. And you may be thinking that we have two unknown angles, but you can figure out this angle because these two lines are said to be parallel. And if then they're intersected by this line right here, this angle is going to be the same as this angle, meaning that our triangle is going to be more like you're going to have X right here, Z right here, and then angle Y right here. And let me zoom out just to make it easier to see. From there, we know the interior angles of a triangle all equal up to 180. Meaning 180 is going to equal to X plus Y plus Z. But but y and z are equal to 20 and 60. So when you add this together, it's basically going to be x plus 80 is an equal 180. And then you isolate x by subtracting each side by 80, and you're going to get x as 100. And our answer is going to be B. Is anyone confused? They aren't completely useless. The only reason you needed lines L and M is basically to see that this y value right here corresponds to this unknown angle. That's the reason you needed the parallel lines, because you wouldn't be able to do that if the lines weren't parallel. This was on the second level of difficulty. All right. Does anyone have any more questions? If not, let's move on. All right, we're gonna move on. Zoom in. So we have triangle XYZ. The measure of angle X is 23 and the measure of angle Y is 66. What is the measure of angle Z? This one should be pretty straightforward. So let's go over this problem. So what we're going to see is we have our triangle XYZ. The measure of the interior angles is going to be equal to 180, meaning 180 is going to be equal to X plus Y plus Z. But we know angle X and Y's value are 23 and 66. So you can just write 23 plus 66 and then plus our angle Z. And then from here, it's just isolating angle Z. And you can do this with a calculator or you can do it with math. That's basically just going to be 180 minus 23 minus 66. And you're going to see that angle Z then equals, sorry, and angle Z is then going to equal 91. And this was on the easiest difficulty. This is just recognizing that triangles have interior angles adding up to 180. And then from there, you can figure out Z.
Wait, they didn't even get that far. And I played it in.
All right. A right circular cone has height 22 centimeters and base with diameter 6 centimeters. The volume of the cone is n pi centimeters cubed. What is the value of n? It does not provide a formula sheet. So although you are given a calculator, you will have to memorize these equations. So if you don't know them, I just spend maybe no more than an hour just trying to just memorize them. But the best way you're going to memorize these is by just doing more practice with them, is what I'd say is the best way you'll improve. Okay, so I'm going to go over this one now. It's a free response, so maybe a little bit harder, but for those of you that don't know the volume of a cone, it's going to be 1/3 pi, and then from there, you're going to multiply r squared times h. Once you get the equation, this really doesn't become a too hard of a problem. So here's our equation. And this n value is basically going to be equal to the 1/3 r squared h. So because you have pi in common, I can just put that by doing n pi. Pi will cancel out in here. And you see that n is equal to 1/3 r squared h. From there, we know the height is 22. And if the height's 22, we know what the radius is because it tells us the diameter is 6. The radius is just half the diameter. So radius is going to be 3. And you're squaring it. And then from here, you can do it just in your head, that 3 squared is going to be 9. Divide that by 3, it's 3, and then 22 times 3 is 66. Or you can just use your calculator to figure it out, which is also a viable option. And again, you don't add the units on the free response question. It already kind of has those implied. But our answer is going to be 66 is going to be equal to our n value. Is anyone confused? This one's okay. Can I say it again? Yes, I can. So the volume of a cone is equal to 1/3 pi r squared times h. And it tells us that the volume of the cone is equal to n pi centimeters cubed. So if you set n pi equal to the volume equation, you see that the pi's will cancel out, and n is then going to be equal to our 1/3, right here. N is then equal to our 1/3 r squared times h. And then from here, you just need to plug in values. You know that r squared is half the diameter, so it's gonna be 3 squared, and then the height is 22. Does that make more sense? And then from there, it's just doing the math, like using a calculator or doing it yourself. You understand? Okay. For those of you wondering, this was on the hardest difficulty, mainly because you need to know your equations. All right. This is another one where you need to know the equation. A cylinder has diameter of 8 inches and a height of 12 inches. What is the volume in cubic inches of the cylinder? Okay. So we're looking for volume of a cylinder. The volume equation, it's length times width times height. And that's the same as saying that volume is equal to area times height and area of the base times height. So just call it AB times height. And even if you don't know, if you just know this, you can figure out what the volume of the cylinder is going to be equal to. The base of a cylinder is going to be a circle, and the area of a circle is just pi r squared. So then when you plug in the area, it's going to be pi r squared times h, and that's equal to our volume. So if you just know area times height is equal to our volume, you can figure out what the volume of a cylinder is. So once you get to here, now we have our volume of our cylinder. You can just plug in the values. The height is going to be of 12. And our radius, we can figure out by dividing the diameter by 2. So instead of 8, our radius is going to be 4, half of that. Sorry, it's going to be 12. And which is just going to be 4 squared. And from here, it just multiply everything out. You don't multiply it by pi because it has pi on all the answer choices. So it's just 12 times 16. That's going to give us 192. So our volume is then equal to 192 pi. All right. Does that make sense to everyone? So our answer is going to be C. No? Okay. So this is similar to the last problem where if you don't understand it, it's basically just you just need to know your equation. And as much as I'd like to say there's going to be other ways to figure this out, you just need to know the equation for it. Know that volume is area times height. The area of a circle is pi r squared, and then you multiply by the area of the base. So what the area of the base is going to be, so when you draw a cylinder out like this, area, the base is a circle, and an area of a circle is pi r squared. And that's going to be written right here. And then from there, you just plug in values. All right, let's see if there's need calculus on it. That's actually an important thing to bring up. For those of you in high school, if you have gone over calculus, the SAT is algebra based, geometry based. Don't, it's not as complicated as you think it is. It's not calculus, it's not anything like that. It's just algebra, geometry. It's not as complicated as you may think it is. There's not really any pre-calc, no. Unless you count like basic trig in it. Is it okay to take in eighth grade? The PSAT it's perfectly okay to take in eighth grade. What you need to know though is that to get scholarships, though, you'll get scholarships if you do good in on the PSAT in 11th grade. But I would recommend if you're in middle school or high school, mainly like 8th through 10th, I would recommend taking the PSAT. It's going to help you a lot in the long run and getting used to it, and it's been good practice. The PSAT will not affect your GPA. How many times can you take? You can take the PSAT happens once a year, so you're only able to take that once per year. But the SAT has a lot of different dates, and you can take the SAT as many times as you want. It won't hurt your college chances as you can just report your best one. All right. Here's a problem though. Number A is 60% greater than a positive B. Number C is 45% less than A. The number C is how many times B? All right. For the PSAT, you have to know trig. Trig, yes, you do need to know trig for the SAT, but the basics of trig, just know the equations for sine, cosine, tangent. Just know how those work. If you want to, we do have a video on that on Crunch Math YouTube, but you have a variety of materials online to figure out how to memorize them. The PSAT this year is going to be, I think, the 15th of October, around that. And if you're in 11th grade, it's mandatory, at least at basis. If not, you'll have to sign up for yourself. All right. I'll answer some questions in a bit, but save your questions for the end since we have 16 minutes, and then I'll answer all of them. Okay. So let's go over this. We're saying the number A is 60% greater than B. So we're going to have A right here. Let me draw it again. We're going to have A is 60% greater than B. What this means, remember 60% is written as 0.6 when you're doing it in math. And if it's 60% greater, it's going to be A is equal to 1.6 times the value of B, or 160 times greater. Or it's going to be 60, this means it's 60 times greater than B. So we have this relationship right here. The next part, let's move on to the other one. When they say the number C is 45% less than A, what this tells us that C is then, if it's 45% less, that means C is 55% of A, because you're just subtracting that 55 from 100. So C is then 0.55 of A. When it won't be 1.6 plus B instead of 1.6B, that's not how it's going to work, because you're not adding 1.6 plus B. It's 60% greater than it. So it's going to be 60, it's going to be 1.6 times B. It's just how the math works. If you're not adding 1.6, then it's not 60% greater. Then it's only going to be 1.6. And that, why is it 1.6? I'll go over this really quick. So 1.6 is the same as, when you write it as a percent, same as 160%. What this means is that when you multiply by 1 by times B, it's gonna be 60% greater than B. The reason it isn't just 60% is because if you say it's 60%, that means A is 60% of B, which is incorrect. It's 60% greater. It's 60% greater, which is why it's 160% of B. When you say something's 160% of B, that's the same as saying it's 60% greater than B. It's a little bit confusing in your head, but as you do more problems, you'll get more versed in it. I'll explain it more at the end if you have questions. So from here, we have these two relationships. We want to find the number C is how many times B. So what we're going to do is we're going to put A in terms of B using this relationship right here. So you're going to see from dividing each side by 0.55, you're going to see A is then C over 0.55. From this, what we're going to do is once we have this, when we arranged it, we can plug it back into A is equal to 1.6B. I'll do that right here. So you're just going to see C over 0.55 is then equal to 1.6 times B. And then you want to just isolate B, or you want to isolate C. And how you're going to do that is just you're going to multiply 1.6B times 0.55. And when you use your calculator, you're going to C is 0.88 of B. And what this means is that C is 88% of B. And that's just how it's gonna be. And your answer is then gonna be 88. It's not 0.88 because you need it to be a percent. It needs to be at times. Well, actually, it would be. Sorry, it would be 0.88. Oh, so again, that's actually my bad. It's gonna be 0.88 because you don't do the percent. You need to write as 0.88 because it's how many times is it in B? Yeah, it should be 0.88. Sorry about that. Yeah, it should be 0.88. That was my bad in terms of speaking. All right, let me repeat this as some people are confused on how it works. The number A is 60% greater than B. What this means is your multiply A is going to be 1.6 times B, because when you convert the percentages to like a decimal, 60% greater, that means instead of, let's say you have your baseline 100%, now you're adding 60% to that. So when you convert that to decimals, it's the same as 1 plus 0.6 to make it 60% greater, which is where this 1.6 comes from. And then it's 60% greater than B. So just A is equal to 1.5 times B. Now, how you get this C relationship, it says C is 45% less than A. So if you subtract 45% from 100%, you're going to get 55. And from there, you can just say that by this relationship, C is then 55% of A, which is the same as 0.55. From here, you just put A in terms of C. So C is going to be A is going to be C over 0.55. Set that equal to this original relationship right here. And then do the math from there. You're going to get C is equal to 0.88 times B. So C is 0.88, or you're going to see that C is 0.88 times B. So the number C is how many times B, and that's just going to be 0.88. It's kind of a mouthful saying it all, but our answer is going to be this. Are you still confused? If so, what part is it? All right. This one's good because I saw this on when I took it. You're gonna see problems like this. The scatter plot shows the relationship between two variables, x and y. A line of best fit is also shown. Which of the following equations best represents the line of best fit? You're gonna see problems like this, so you just know how to deal with them. Sorry, I'm gonna go over this one since we're running out of time. So this is just figuring out the slope and setting up an equation. What I'd start with here is figure out the y-intercept since you know it. The y-intercept is going to be right here, and it's right below 3, and they're calling it 2.8. And from this, you can just eliminate C, eliminate D. The reason is these have negative y-intercepts, which is incorrect. It must be positive. And I'm gonna be honest with you, because these are all the same slopes, you don't need to do the math. Just know how slopes work. This is a positive slope, meaning because of this, we need to see that these two are the same slopes, but this one's negative. And because it's negative, it's wrong. If it was negative, it'd be something more like this. You'd have your y-intercept right here, but it'd be something more like this. And that's incorrect. So you don't even need to do the math necessarily on this one to figure out the problem. If you want to know how, you would just need to just take a point on this graph, let's say right here, take another point right here, and then just do change in y over change in x. But this is the fastest way you can figure out this problem without doing any math. If you all want me to do the math, just let me know and I will. If not, we can move on. All right. I think we can fit in one more problem, and then if you want to stay after the time's up, I'll answer any questions you'll have about the PSAT. And before y'all leave, I can do one more graph. Yeah, I have one more graph right here. Let's do. All right. I'm gonna wait for one more person to answer. All right. Let's go over this one really quick. So we're looking for the slope. Before we do any math on this, let's just look at something really quick. This is a negative slope, so slope must be negative. So from here, just eliminate C and D because these are positive slopes, meaning if it was positive, it'd be going up, but this is going down. From there, now you've already gotten your answer choices down to A and B. So now here, we just need to do the math. So let's take 2 points that are defined. Let's take this one, which is going to be at 112. And then let's just have a greater spread. Let's take this one at 12.3. Slope is change in y over change in x. Our initial x value is going to be at 1. Our final is going to be at 12. And then our initial y value is going to be at 12. And our final y value right here at 3. And then from here, it's just doing the math. So you can use that on our calculator, or you can do it yourself, whichever one you prefer. And you're going to get around, once you round it yourself, you'll get negative 0.8, and which our answer is going to be B. What level is this one? I want to say this one was level 2. It was on a level 2 difficulty. Because, all right, that's going to be the amount of questions we have time for. So I'm going to stop